everybody, this is Steven. Today I intend to talk to you about Batman villains. So I decided to split this discussion into two different videos, so I'll try and cover as many of them as I can in part one. Of course I do not have every single character, but I have certain ones. So yeah, it will be in two parts. So today, part one, we're going to be covering about 7 different ones. The most famous one among them that I'm going to start with first will be Joker. And this version is from the DC Collectibles Icons series. And this is the most classic version of him, with his fedora hat and a long purple coat. And he's carrying a Tommy gun. He also came with a couple of different hand attachments, with an open hand, the one hand also holding a crowbar, and so forth. The hat is not removable and the coat is not removable as well. There is an articulation in the arms and legs and in the head, but it's all a bit limited due to the fact that he's wearing this molded coat over him. Anyway, why start with Joker first? Well, first of all, because I like the character. Of all the Batman villains, I like him the most because he's the most psychotic and sadistic one among them. And the fact is that he decided to have a persona of a clown. That makes it scary, especially to some people who have phobias against clowns, even these days. His story dates back to the very early Batman stories before World War II, so we're talking about 1930s, mid to late 1930s or thereabouts. And he had different origin stories. According to one, he was an unsuccessful comedian before he became Joker, and he was pretty much chased away from most comedy clubs because he just wasn't that good. And then, in a way, he turned to crime by wearing a red hood over his face. And then one fateful night, when he was trying to rob a chemical plant with his gang, Batman showed up. And during the fight, the Red Hood, meaning the Joker in his early days, was practically thrown into a pool full of chemicals, which practically permanently damaged his face and bleached his skin deathly white, which he has right here. And that kind of look remained with him ever since. And of course, on top of it, he went psychotic and almost completely crazy. So his personality changed and he became extremely aggressive and violent and turned permanently to the world of crime and becoming one of the major leaders of the crime gangs all over Gotham. He's been most known and the most persistent enemy of Batman throughout the years, and of course he also at different times faced the Justice League as well. Specifically, he was going up against Superman and others. He can be very unpredictable and, as I already stated, very violent, and he does seem to have some level of intelligence because he's just not a aggressive, stupid type. But his mind works in a totally distorted way that nobody really understands but himself. And maybe his girlfriend does, Harley Quinn, but more about her later. He did had numerous appearances in the cartoon series over the years and in the comic books by different artists, and some of the artists had different interpretation of how he should look like. Also, he showed up in one of the earliest Batman TV series back from the 1960s, where Adam West was playing Batman. He was played back then by a famous actor called Cesar Romero, I believe. And he was representing Joker in the most interesting way, at least for the early TV series. After that, he did not make an appearance until, well, he did show up in the Super Friends cartoon series as part of the bad guys, or the ones who were led by the Lex Luthor in that particular series. He had a major appearance in the 1989 Batman movie with Michael Keaton that started the Batman craze to a whole new level. He was played in that movie by Jack Nicholson, who portrayed him the best of all the Jokers on screen, as far as I'm concerned. Jack Nicholson had the right facial features and so forth, and just the right persona to play him, and I think he did a wonderful job out of playing Joker in that movie, and he remained memorable to me ever since. After that, he did appear again in the new type of Batman movies that came since 2000s, such as Batman Begins. Sorry, not in Batman Begins, but he showed up in the well, Batman Begins was the first movie in that series. He showed up in the next movie after that, and Christian Bale was the one playing Batman in that trilogy, and in the second part, Joker did show up, and he looked far more psychotic and didn't look anything like this figure. He looked very different because he was just reimagined to look more creepy and sadistic, and he was played by the late Heath Ledger actor, who, according to many fans these days, is the best Joker. I still prefer Jack Nicholson, but that's just me. So yes, he left his mark in that movie quite a bit, and Joker became even more so immensely popular due to that. And then, of course, Joker will have, or had already had an appearance, I guess, prior to him becoming a Joker in the Gotham TV series that's still on these days on TV. I honestly don't know how he looks like in there, but I did not follow the series after a couple of episodes. I simply stopped following it. Gotham is talking mostly about the early days of Bruce Wayne while he was still a child and growing up as a teenager, leading to the time when he becomes Batman, and showing most of his villains how they were at the beginning of their careers. Among them is Joker as well, before he became what he became in the future. And of course he did have appearances in the Batman animated series in the 1990s, where he was voiced by Mark Hamill. And for those of you who don't know who Mark Hamill is, he's of course of the Star Wars fame. He played, and he still plays, Luke Skywalker. And Mark Hamill did a wonderful job by giving voice to Joker in that animated series and in certain other animated series where he reprised his role as the Joker. So he did a very good job out of it, and especially the laughter part was the creepiest one. Anyway, after that, he did had an appearance in the Justice League cartoon series and in the Justice League Unlimited as well, where he more or less remained the same in his classic look. And of course, he had several appearances in some of the DC animated movies. And of course, he showed up in the other types of memorabilia, such as the Arkham City and Arkham Knight trilogy of the games, and of course he showed up as well in pretty much all three games of Lego Batman. So the first Lego Batman game, and then the second one, and the third one that's probably the best one, the Batman Beyond Gotham. So he had numerous appearances in different kind of entertainment merchandise. And he still remains as one of the most popular Batman villains to this day. There is of course, I almost forget, there is yet another movie Joker that showed up in the Suicide Squad, where he's played by the actor Jared Leto. And I apologize if I mispronounced that, but I believe that's the pronunciation of his name. He played his vision of the Joker. And from what I understand, he will show up in the sequel to Suicide Squad. And of course, there is some rumors that Joker will have a movie about his early days, where he may or may not be played by Leonardo DiCaprio. So that remains to be seen, because that movie may yet to come to the theaters in the future. So anyway, that was just a short history of Joker here. And one of his most notorious crimes that he's known for in the comic books is in the specific title called The Death in the Family. What happened there is that he managed to capture the new Robin, Jason Todd, who became a new Robin after Dick Grayson grew up and became Nightwing. And after capturing Jason Todd, he managed to beat him to death with a crowbar which was the most violent thing Joker ever did, and committed, that was considered quite a crime altogether, because Jason could not defend himself. He was tied to a chair and brutally murdered by Joker. And some of the Joker's signature things is his laughter, and of course the fact that he likes to use a toxic gas that can make people laugh to death. And they usually, once they're dead, they have this greasy, nasty grin that permanently stays on their faces. And that's one of his signature weapons. Now, Joker did manage to get himself a girlfriend in his own image when he was staying in Arkham Asylum on his numerous stays there. And that's the moment we talk about her. This is Harley Quinn, the only girl who ends up falling in love with Joker because he brainwashed her when she used to be normal. She used to be a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum, and her real name is Harley Quinzel. And she used to try and talk to the inmates there to try and see if there is anything she can do to help them get back to normal, or even get back to the normal way of life, or get more information about who they really are as people. In the case of Joker, she found him fascinating subject, and she spent a great deal of time with him, and he managed to work his magic on her. She eventually went insane, partially due to interest in Joker and so forth, and then her personality dramatically changed. So she decided to dress herself in a similar fashion like Joker in order to please him, and she took a permanent interest in him and became his girlfriend and followed him around on his crime spree everywhere he went. She's always cheerful in an insane kind of way, and she also carries weapons of her own choice, which is this cork gun here and this enormous mallet that she likes to hit Batman and Robin with, or even Nightwing for that matter. The two of them are in a way an unstoppable pair, going hand in hand and committing crimes all over the place. Harley Quinn did have an appearance in the Batman animated series and numerous other Batman-related animated series as well, and in the Batman games as well. Her appearance kept changing in the games and in the comics, and in the comics and in the toys as well, and in the computer and other console games. So she would wear different types of costumes. Sometimes this is her most classic costume that she's known for as a court jester, but she had numerous other costumes that look quite a bit different. I do have a few other versions of her, not that many, but about 3 more that I can think of right now on top of my head. But I can talk to you about those another time. I'm just showing you here her most classic look so that you guys can see how she looks in her original appearance. And yeah, that would be as far as she goes, but more about her when I do a separate video which only deals with her. The next one in line here would be Poison Ivy. She is also a villain of Gotham City, and she faced Batman on numerous occasions, and on some occasions she would also face Superman, not on her own free will, but due to being forced into doing it. She's a nature lover, and she's extremely, abnormally so, overprotective of plants, and whenever somebody tries to destroy those plants, that's where she goes insane. And that's practically what led her to crime in the end. She grows all sorts of plants, especially the violent varieties that she can use to her advantage when she's committing different crimes. And she's usually standing up for the rights of plants and botanical gardens and similar things. And she usually would go berserk if anybody tries to hurt plant in any kind of way. Batman already fought her on numerous occasions. She also has a long history in the comic books, and She also showed up in the Batman games as well, of different kinds of Batman games. She always had an appearance, but most of the time wearing different variations of her costume. And she also had a couple of other action figures from different lines. Specifically, there was the DC Direct versions where she's wearing her classic costume, which is mostly all green, and sometimes she's shown barely wearing anything at all except certain plants covering some parts of her body. And that kind of look was represented in the DC Direct figure that was based on the art of Alex Ross, a famous artist who worked for DC and Marvel. And this particular version belongs to DC Collectibles, the New 52 line, where most of the heroes and villains were reimagined. So this is how she looks in that particular line. She did have an appearance in the third Batman movie, the ones that were involving different actors playing Batman. First one being Michael Keaton in the first two movies, then also Val Kilmer and George Clooney. So she appeared in part, excuse me for a moment, in part 4, the final movie of that series back in the 90s, and she was played by Uma Thurman, along with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was playing Mr. Freeze, and also Bane showed up in that movie too, except I cannot remember who played him. But in that movie she faced Batgirl, Robin, and Batman. So that's her major screen appearance as far as that movie goes. In the newer movies with Christian Bale, as far as I know, she did not have any appearance. However, she did have an appearance in the Gotham TV series. She was shown the way she was before she became Poison Ivy. She was already a teenager and already interested in plants a great deal. So that's pretty much her early beginnings. She seems to be good friends with Harley Quinn, at least according to some of the Batman animated series episodes. And she did show up also in the Justice League cartoon series and in Batman Brave and the Bold cartoon series as well. So she had quite a bit of appearance in different media over the years. So that would be Poison Ivy. Another female villain and a long-time enemy of Batman is Catwoman, real name Selina Kyle. She is mostly interested in stealing valuables. Precious stones and diamonds are her favorite, and any kind of ancient sculptures that have a great value to them. So she's mostly interested in things like that. As far as I know, she's not that interested in robbing banks and what have you. But for the museum artifacts and relics or any precious stones, she's very much interested in that. And she has been fighting Batman since the early days of the comics about Batman back in the 1930s, 1940s. She had a very different costume back then. And she also took quite a bit of interest in Batman and ends up liking him as well. So she's not really a villain all the way, because she also, it seems, has a good side, because many times she would join forces with Batman to stop some much bigger criminal out there. So in a way she seems to walk a line in between good and evil. And in some cases, in some interpretations of her, she actually ends up marrying Batman, or that Bruce Wayne, that is. There is a specific episode like that in the Batman Brave and the Bold cartoon series, where the two of them do end up together in the end and have a son, who ends up becoming a new Robin in the distant future. And she had appearances in other toy lines as well, such as Legends of Dark Knight by Kenner in the 1990s. There were two versions of her in that line. One of them, she's wearing the same exact costume. In the second one, she's more dressed up as an Egyptian goddess with pieces that she's wearing resembling a cat. Then she also had numerous DC Direct figures as well, made in such a way that she's wearing different costumes, such as her classic version was released at one point, meaning the first appearance. Then this one was from Batman Nightfall, from a comic book story. And then of course there is another one of her where she was based on the storyline called Hush. She is also in there, but wearing a more modified costume. She did have an appearance in the TV series back in the 60s where Adam West plays Batman, so she did appear there in several episodes. And then of course in the sequel to the original Batman movie from 1989, in the Batman Returns, she did show up being played by Michelle Pfeiffer, and she wore quite a different costume, which was all dark and very different from this one. And then you can see Selina Kyle in her younger days in the Gotham TV series as well. She shows up in Batman Brave and the Bold and in the Batman animated series as well from the 1990s. So she had numerous appearances in comic books, cartoons, and movies as well. And she did show up also in the new trilogy of the Batman movies, where Christian Bale plays Batman, and she showed up in the final one, the final third movie installment. And again, she had quite a bit of a difference in her costume. And then the other toy lines where she appeared was the Mattel's DC Universe Classics, and she also has several different versions of her from the DC Collectibles, partially based on comics. There is also designer series versions of Catwoman, and of course from the Batman Arkham City trilogy of games as well. So she had quite a bit of a time, and she became quite a popular character over the years and decades. So that would be the story of Catwoman, also known as Selina Kyle. The next one would be a very equally notorious character and a villain, such as Joker. This is Two-Face, real name Harvey Dent. He was a district attorney before the nasty accident that permanently scarred one half of his face. He was a very successful lawyer who would pursue criminals in Gotham and put them behind bars, but he was becoming increasingly reckless and gaining some serious enemies in the underworld who wanted him dead. And one particular mafia boss that he was going to put into jail during the trial splashed Harvey with a concealed bottle of acid that permanently scarred Harvey Dent on one half of the face and made him into Two-Face. Due to the pain and the disfigurement, he slowly but surely went insane and became a villain known as Two-Face. He would carry his lucky coin that he even had before he became Two-Face, and what he really did on that coin that he's holding here in the hand, he would scar one side of the coin and the other side would remain clean, just like his face. So when he's trying to give a victim or another criminal a chance to see if they deserve to live or die, he will simply ask them to choose the side, and he tells them, if the scarred side comes up, you're dead. If the clean side comes up, you will live. So he will flip the coin in the air, and when it lands, if it lands scarred, he will kill that person right there and then. If it's a clean side, then he will give them another chance. But most of the time the coin would land on the scarred side. In this version, he is made by DC Collectibles and from a designer series by Greg Capullo, and several other Gotham characters were done as well in this particular series. Two-Face here had appearance again in all sorts of merchandise and media. He saw the release of his figure since at least 1990s onwards. He was in the Batman animated series that shows his beginnings and what happened to him after he became Two-Face. He also showed up in the Justice League in one particular episode, and he showed up in the other animated series about Batman, and there were many of them these days, and in Batman Brave and the Bold as well. And he had 2 movie appearances. The first one being in the third Batman movie, where Val Kilmer plays Batman. He was in that movie. He was played by Tommy Lee Jones, a very known actor, who portrayed him rather well. And that's the same movie where Riddler shows up as well as the other villain. So the 2 of them were causing chaos for Batman. And he had also an appearance in the second movie of the new trilogy of Batman movies, where Christian Bale plays Batman. And he showed up in that movie as well, where we see him as a district attorney, and then we see what happens after he gets scarred. And in that movie he is showing up with Joker. And also he had appearances in the Batman games as well. So he had quite a long history. And he does exist in the very early Batman comics from before World War II, where he was already an established character back at the beginning. So that's Two-Face, also known as Harvey Dent. The next classic enemy of Batman is Riddler. Real name Edward Nygma. And the play of his name would Edward Nygma would practically mean enigma. His favorite pastime and a hobby before he became Riddler is to deal in riddles. He would always take abnormally high level of fascination with riddles of any kind. And his origin stories are different. According to the newest one in Gotham TV series, he was shown the way he was before he became Riddler, and he seemed to have worked for the forensics department in the Gotham PD. And eventually he becomes evil. I did not really see the episodes when the transformation takes place, but he did have appearances on TV, and the TV series, the cartoon series, and the movies. His earliest appearance on TV was in the Adam West Batman TV series from the 60s, and he was played by an actor, Frank Gorshin, back then. And after that, he did show up in the third Batman movie with Val Kilmer and Tommy Lee Jones, and he was also portrayed as somebody who has an abnormal fascination with riddles, and he uses riddles frequently to commit crimes, and he would love to give riddles to Batman to solve, so that each riddle would practically mean to reveal what he will do next or where he will strike next and commit crime. Batman would have to use his powers of deduction to solve every riddle and to figure out where Riddler is going with this. He also had appearances in the Batman animated series and in the Batman Brave and the Bold, and also in the Super Friends cartoon series from the 80s and 70s, and in the Batman games as well, such as Arkham City, Arkham Knight, and in the Lego Batman games as well. Here he's represented the way he looks in the Greg Capullo designer series by DC Collectibles. He has some more of a regular articulation. Arms can move at the elbow. He can bend the arm. He can move the arms 360 degrees. The legs can bend at the knee, and then the legs can move a little bit forward. But it's a bit limited due to the fact that he has this molded coat on him. He comes with one accessory, which is this walking stick shaped like a question mark. And aside from that, he's wearing his hat, which is molded onto him, and it cannot be removed. And his classic costume would be more along the lines of him wearing a completely green costume that's checkered with question marks, and he would have a mask across the eyes. But this is a more present day, more updated version of his costume, a little bit more simplified. But the basic idea of the character is still the same. So this is Riddler, and also known as Edward Nygma. Now, this other character is also known among Batman villains, and this one is done by DC Collectibles again, Greg Capullo's designer series, and this is Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze has a long history of being an enemy of Batman, and again, he may or may have not worked out a fine line in between being evil and, in some occasion, a tragic character, because he lost his wife when he used to be a scientist and used to be normal, and he loved his wife very much so, and he couldn't bear to see the fact that she was dying. So what he did, he managed to come up with a partial cure, but in a way that cure didn't really work. So what he really did, in order not to lose her, he put her into cryogenic state. In other words, he put her to sleep until the time that he's able to find a cure for her, and then he will permanently cure her. In order to save his wife, he commits numerous crimes to gain more money to equip his lab and to try and come up with that cure. His real name is Victor Freeze, but when he became evil, he became Mr. Freeze. In the early days, back in the 1960s, in the TV series, he was portrayed as an actual typical villain who is there just for the money. There was no indication about him having a wife or anything like that. So that story, I believe, or that version of the story, was put later on. He did show up in the Batman animated series in the 1990s, and then he also showed up in other incarnations of Batman series in the 2000s. He showed up in Batman Brave and the Bold cartoon series, and of course he had numerous toys made of him from different companies over the years. One such figure of him was made in the Mattel DC Universe Classics, and then he was also made based on his other types of costumes he used to wear, and some of those obviously come from DC Direct, and this particular one comes from DC Collectibles. And there was also a figure of his animated appearance from the 1990s in the Batman animated series as well, so there was one or two figures based on that. He did show up in Batman Beyond cartoon series that came after Batman animated series, which shows him in a distant future in Gotham, where not much remained of his body except the head and some artificial legs. And in this case, he comes with a removable helmet, and he has a rather regular type of articulation, nothing spectacular really. He comes with this enormous freeze ray gun. He has some tanks attached to his back from where he carries all the stuff that he uses to freeze people with. And he's quite detailed, the way he was sculpted. There is a great deal of detail all over him. And other versions of his toy that are from other companies make him look in his more of a rather classic look, and he appears a bit bulky in appearance and so forth, due to his equipment taking a great deal, making him look bigger than he is. And specifically, he did have an appearance in the Batman movie, where George Clooney plays Batman in Part 4 back in the 1990s, and in that movie he's played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who represented the character in an okay way, I guess, and there was a lot of jokes he made as Mr. Freeze, such as one of the famous lines being "Allow me to break the ice," and similar puns, due to the fact that he's able to that he prefers cold and winter rather than sunlight and things of that sort. And of course, it seems that Mr. Freeze cannot survive without having all this apparatus on him, because he's used to the cold, not the warm weather. And what really changed him, there was an accident at the time when he was trying to initially cure his wife, and that accident, an explosion, permanently turned him into Mr. Freeze. That's why he looks like he's a man made of ice. So that would be the story of Mr. Freeze. I personally consider him to be a rather tragic character, and due to a tragedy with his wife, he becomes evil, not because he wanted to be, but the set of circumstances made him that way, and partially the accident that turned him the way he is. I wanted to just show you one last thing which has to do with the Joker, just to show you another version of him that I have. This one is from the prequel series before DC Universe Classics made by Mattel. This was the version of him, not as articulated as the later ones, but he did come with an interesting walking stick with the Jester's Joker face on top of it, and he did come with a mallet, again, that has Joker's image on both sides. He had articulation in the legs and in the arms, but there was no elbow articulation and no waistline articulation either. So, one thing to mention, where did Bob Kane, the creator of Batman, get the idea to create the Joker? There was a silent German black and white movie back in the day, I believe in 1920s, where a story follows the story of an actual clown in real life, and that nasty grin that Joker has in all his appearances is what Bob Kane took from that particular movie, where the story is being told about a clown, and the German actor who portrays that clown had a particular, you could say almost scary looking grin on his face throughout the story. So that's where Bob Kane, according to some sources, got the idea for creating Joker in the first place. He was influenced by that particular movie. I believe you could find a little bit more information on that particular movie if you look up Joker's fictional biography on Wikipedia, because I do seem to remember finding some information there. But that's an interesting little detail about the creation of the character. So yes, this is the Mattel version, and I'll just show you the DC Collectible one side by side. In both cases they're wearing their classic purple suit, except the one on the left does not have the hat. And this is how they look from the back. Anyway, this is then all I can say about the first part of the discussion on the Batman villains. Hopefully soon I will be making the second part to finish up the Batman villains that I have here in the collection, but this is it for the moment. I do appreciate you guys watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed this story as well and the discussion we had here today. So I'll catch you guys next time, and please, if you like what you see, do subscribe and leave a comment if you wish. And that's it for now. Catch you guys later. Bye.